So, a few days ago, I posted a poll on my community page asking which of the two second stage Dendro reactions players preferred now that version 3 of Genshin has been out for a while. Hyper Bloom or Burgeon? And to the shock of absolutely no one, Hyper Bloom absolutely dominated Burgeon in this poll. Out of a total of 66 votes at the time this screenshot was taken, Hyper Bloom had a whopping 92% favor over Burgeon's 8%. But why though? Why is Hyper Bloom favored so highly over Burgeon at the moment? And are there any ways that Hoyo can remedy this? That last question in particular is what I hope to provide an answer to in this video, using my own thoughts and opinions as a jumping off point. But before that, let's do a quick refresher of what exactly Hyper Bloom and Burgeon are. So the formula you see on screen here is used by the game to calculate how much damage is done by transformative reactions. Electrocharge, Superconduct, and for this video, Burgeon and Hyper Bloom. Long story short, the damage is calculated by 4 specific values. A number value that's based on the reaction being triggered, which is then multiplied by the level of the character triggering the reaction, which is then multiplied by a value calculated using the EM stat of the character triggering the reaction, which is then multiplied by the enemy's resistance to the element in question. So, for example, this is the part of the equation where the enemy's cryo resistance is used for when Superconduct is triggered. The most important part of this formula for today's video is the reaction multiplier value, which Hyper Bloom and Burgeon both share a value of 3, meaning that if all other factors in the equation are the same, both reactions deal the same amount of damage when triggered. So a Hyper Bloom from a 1000 EM level 90 Raiden Shogun will deal the same damage as a Burgeon from a 1000 EM level 90 Toma, for example. This means that there are only 2 main differences between these reactions. But it's these differences in particular that lead to Hyper Bloom's current superiority in the meta. Both Hyper Bloom and Burgeon are second stage reactions that are triggered by applying Pyro or Electro to the Dendro cores created by Bloom, which is caused when you apply Dendro to Hydro. And it's the third element in these combinations that sets them apart the most. Why? Because not every reaction triggered in these comps will be the second stage reactions. Occasionally, something else that's somewhat undesirable by comparison will take place. Electrocharged and Quicken for Hyper Bloom, and Vaporize and Burning for Burgeon. When Electrocharged and Quicken are triggered on an enemy, enough Hydro and Dendro aura is left on a target afterwards that it allows you to still trigger a Bloom reaction as long as you hit the target with the right element afterwards. So, not only is it fairly easy to follow up any incorrect reactions with Blooms and Hyper Blooms, but it actually makes them much less detrimental to the Hyper Bloom team's success by allowing the spread of Electro and Dendro to other targets to be much easier, which is one of the many reasons why Official's Ascension 4 talent is so good on the Hyper Bloom teams, even if she isn't the one triggering the Hyper Blooms. Burgeon, on the other hand, has to be very cautious about triggering its worst case scenario reactions, due to the aura on the enemy being completely consumed unless all but the strongest elemental application is used on them. Vaporize usually leaves no Hydro remaining on the enemy to apply Dendro to, and Burning usually extinguishes any Dendro on the target before Hydro can be applied to generate a Dendro core. As a side note, this is one of the many reasons why Nahida's elemental skill is so strong. It applies an additional layer of Dendro to targets after any reaction is triggered on when they're marked by her skill, making it far easier to follow up on any burning targets with Hydro attacks to generate Dendro cores. Another thing to consider is how and when the Dendro damage is dealt from these reactions, not only to enemies, but to yourself. The damage from Burgeon is dealt to the enemy and yourself the instant that the reaction is triggered. It also covers a large AoE, so not only is dodging the self-damage basically impossible, but even triggering the reaction at a distance can be risky in case you misspace yourself. Hyper Bloom damage is not triggered instantly, but wherever the homing seeds connect with the enemy. The AoE is also much smaller, so it's far easier to avoid taking self-damage when from a distance. That is, of course, assuming the homing shots land anywhere even remotely close to you to begin with. While yes, there are more characters being released like Nilou and Yao Yao who gain benefits from taking Dendro self-damage, other characters must rely on a healer to endure the damage. Because of how easy it is to avoid the damage on HyperBloom comps compared to Burgeon comps, this heavily skews the risk-reward nature of these second stage reactions in HyperBloom's favor. Another reason why HyperBloom is used more often at the moment is because there's generally more available characters that can easily help trigger HyperBloom. Remember what I said earlier about how the third element differentiated these two reactions the most? Well, apparently, there's a lot more Electro characters that can trigger HyperBloom reliably compared to Pyro characters. Currently, Thoma is the best and arguably only Pyro character that can fill the role as a trigger for Burgeon. I know there's some niche comps where players use C6 Bennett and his Pyro infusion and stack him with full EM to trigger Burgeon, but a lot of players tend to not C6 their Bennett, so I'm not gonna mention that. I'm just gonna stick to Thoma here. Not only is Thoma currently the only reliable trigger for Burgeon, but unlike how building Raiden Shogun with EM does not harm her ability to provide energy for her team and boost her team's burst damage, building Thoma with EM significantly harms the durability of his shields, at least from my personal experience, to the point that trading one of his EM artifacts for HP or bringing a healer of some kind is still a must in order to survive. Meanwhile, nearly the entirety of the Electro roster can take advantage of HyperBloom to devastating effect. Raiden Shogun, Kuki Shinobu, Lisa, Fischl, even Dori if you're desperate. Lisa is actually a somewhat slept on option for new players because the introduction of HyperBloom made it to where as soon as you make it to Sumeru early game, you can spam HyperBloom with Lisa and you can make a lot of early game, difficult early game content trivial with Lisa, making Lisa actually one of the most slept on characters in the game for newer players. So what are some changes that could improve Burgeon? Well, as I said earlier, Thoma is arguably the only Pyro character that can fill the role as a trigger for Burgeon at the moment. But with new characters being released every few months, it's honestly inevitable that a new Pyro character will eventually be released that synergizes with Burgeon even better than Thoma. Better off-field Pyro application, being tankier against self-inflicted Dendro damage, etc, etc. Considering that the last limited 5-star Pyro character released was Yoimiya, not a single 4-star Pyro unit was released since Thoma, and Dia was just recently added. Personally, I expect it to be a while until a new Pyro character in general is added, much less one that fits in Burgeon comps better than Thoma. But it will happen eventually. But what are some ways to improve Burgeon so that players will be more incentivized to use it now? This is the part of the video where I start to give my own thoughts and opinions about how to buff Burgeon. And an indirect way to buff Burgeon, in my opinion, would be to buff the burning reaction. HyperBloom comps heavily benefit from the fact that both Electrocharged and Quicken / Spread and Aggravate can still be used to help generate Dendro cores because of both of their respective elements being able to easily remain on the target while the reactions take place. The same is not true for burning, aka the reaction that will have the most negative impact on a Burgeon team's DPS if triggered, due to its lingering elements usually being just Pyro, and Pyro cannot be used to make Dendro cores. The burning Pyro aura must first be extinguished via reaction before Dendro and Hydro can be reapplied to generate Dendro cores most of the time. So, what if the burning reaction was buffed to act similar to Electrocharged and Quicken, where both Dendro and Pyro elements are coexisting on the target while it's active? That way, a Hydro attack can trigger Vaporize and a Dendro Core while removing the Burning Aura from enemies. This could make the generation of Dendro Cores a bit more consistent for Burgeon, without worrying about pyro reactions ruining everything. Plus, I don't think anyone's gonna complain about the burning reaction getting a buff of some kind, right? But as far as a more direct buff is concerned, let's go back to the transformative reaction formula that I mentioned earlier. The reaction multiplier value for Hyper Bloom and Burgeon is 3, meaning that they currently deal the same amount of damage to both enemies and players. However, like I said earlier, the risk-reward balance is heavily in Hyper Bloom's favor at the moment, where it gets all the damage with usually nowhere near the same amount of self-damage as a trade-off compared to Burgeon. So there's 2 simple ways to change this. One would be to buff Burgeon damage. It's a simple buff, maybe increase the AoE even further or increase the reaction multiplier value from 3 to 3.5 or hell, maybe even 4 if you're being risky. The second option would be to nerf Hyper Bloom. Maybe add a portion of Dendro damage that occurs where the homing shot is created so that Hyper Bloom comps have to be more concerned about self-damage. Maybe nerf the damage of Hyper Bloom outright. This option in particular is the one I would recommend the least out of all that I've mentioned though, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. To be honest, I've probably been overthinking this entire situation. Maybe Burgeon is just in a rough patch that will probably be alleviated as soon as more pyro characters in general that can utilize Burgeon more efficiently than Toma are added to the game. But regardless, I just wanted to get my thoughts about the whole situation in video format just to air my thoughts out. This video was basically a brain exercise. I'm not acting like some all-knowing, omnipotent being or whatever. It's just simply my thoughts about the situation. What do you feel about it? How do you feel about how dominant Hyper Bloom is compared to Burgeon at the moment? And how long do you think it's going to be before more pyro characters are added that can properly take advantage of Burgeon? Comment down below what you feel about it. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.